Hi, Brian. Thanks for joining me on Behind the Build. I'm Paul Drake, and this podcast is about getting real insights from leaders in housing, manufacturing, and construction. There's no scripts, there's no sugarcoating. It's great exposure for you and your organisation. Here's how I would like to structure our conversation this afternoon. I'd like to understand your background, the trends you're seeing in the industry, whether that's technology, market shifts, or operational changes, any challenges that you're seeing or facing right now, and where you'd like to take the organisation over the next sort of 6 to 12 months. We'll wrap up at the end with any insights that we might find valuable. Does that all sound good?
Indeed, yeah. And thank you for the invitation, Paul, and look forward to talking to you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Brian. It'll probably take about 30 minutes. So let's start with you. If you wouldn't mind telling me a bit about yourself, Brian, your role, and how you ended up in this position, please.
Yeah, so Paul, I increasingly describe myself as a housing enthusiast. So my background is public sector housing. I've worked in local government and housing associations, but the last 10 years, I've worked for myself as a consultant. So I started off in local government, London Borough of Wandsworth as a housing trainee, switched over to Corporation of London, which is the local authority for the City of London, very much on the kind of housing management side. Then moved over to working in housing associations, so where you're not only managing the homes, but back then building homes as well. Um, my last proper jobs, and I have to be careful how you describe that. I once said that in front of a county council leader when working as a consultant. He said, "Well, why are we paying you so much if it's not a proper job?" So that was a slightly sticky moment.
Yeah.
But I was head of housing and property at Thanet District Council, which is the local authority, Margate, Broadstairs, Ramsgate. Had the novel position of being my mum and dad's landlord there because I grew up in council housing and they were the tenants of the council at the time. Then went over as chief exec of a stock transfer housing association based again in Kent. Range of things happened. We'd ended up with 26 legal entities and six chief execs as part of a group, left on very good terms, but then went over to work for the county council on housing strategy and kind of got used to being more grandparent than parent, meddling. And I was being asked to do things that I couldn't do as a local bureaucrat, so transitioned over to the consultancy work. So in my consultancy work, I work with developers, housing associations, local authorities, predominantly around trying to accelerate the delivery of social and affordable housing. And outside of that, I've got a kind of portfolio of kind of non-exec roles and voluntary roles. So I'm on the board of two housing associations, a local housing company, but I also am a trustee at Turner Contemporary, the art gallery in Margate, and I chair the Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board, and I'm the interim chair of the Ramsgate Neighbourhood Board. So I suffer from this incurable disease called I can't say no-itis.
Yeah.
It's all stuff that I'm interested in. I'm blessed
Yeah.
that I work with interesting people doing interesting things and manage to make a living along the side of that. So so all good.
Excellent. So I was going to ask you if there's a typical day in your work life, but I'm guessing there probably isn't, judging by the number of hats you currently
Not
wear.
so much now. I'm at home much more than I used to be. The financial year before COVID, I think I did something like 18,000 genuine business miles, driving around between mainly kind of Eastbourne, East Kent, and down onto the as far down as sort of Brighton along the south coast. Particularly in the role, then I was retained by the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, advising on housing issues. Post COVID, the world changed to this environment, the virtual environment, and it helps my productivity, and I suppose saves the world in terms of all those miles I was doing out there. And I did have an electric car and still have an electric car, but I'm sure it's not as environmentally friendly as we'd ideally like it to be. But yeah, so days are filled with calls like this, getting out and seeing people when there's an opportunity to do that, and lots of meetings and lots of meddling, as I describe it, mainly in terms of the things I'm working with. But yeah, no one day is exactly the same as the other.
Okay. Moving on to trends then in the industry. So you are a specialist in many aspects of housing. Are you seeing any trends around technology? We've briefly touched on that then, or operational efficiencies that are happening currently that you're seeing?
I'm very excited about AI. And as part of my role chairing the Kent Housing Group, I'm involved with a young housing professionals roundtable, which is chaired by one of a chap, actually, Brandon Lewis, who was one of my interns. He's currently interning elsewhere and will be coming back. But I'm interested in how AI can free us from some of the mundane bureaucracy to be more productive in the things where there's really real value added to come through. I can see in kind of wider public sector how AI could revolutionise planning, for example. There's so much time and energy in terms of document management and processing and looking at various different technical papers, etc., as part of the planning process. And things that don't necessarily need to have the skill and expertise that a town planner has got, and freeing them from those things to make for decision making and advising on applications. So I find that kind of quite exciting. In terms of trends, I mean, I've worked in housing for over 35 years. When I first started back in 1989, there was a housing crisis. And every single year since then, we've had a housing crisis. I kind of describe it as a perma-crisis. So that's my market condition. The fact that we haven't built enough homes, haven't invested in our existing homes in the way that we should, and we have a very imperfect housing market. Sadly, I think that will see me through what years I've got left, but we will do everything I can, if you like, as part of what's in my gift, to leave things a little bit better maybe than I started, but I haven't quite managed that yet.
No, no. So you mentioned AI and it's an emergence then. I mean, that's not going to build more houses, is it? But, do you see it having an impact on that or not? Or you just see it as just making things a bit better for
I think
everyone in that space?
it's about capacity and productivity of those involved in the process. I mean, building a house needs more than ground workers and bricklayers. There's a whole body of activity that goes before you get anywhere near putting a spade in the ground, through that process, and then afterwards as well. The whole kind of due diligence, compliance, technical planning, design, architectural, etc. So I think across those industries, there is a real opportunity, if we're smart and if we're brave, to be able to use technology to, as I say, to increase our ability to do. The skills and having the right skills to be able to create I suppose, an accepting and compliant environment to be able to get good growth delivered, good plan-led growth delivered, requires a whole body of work. And I see AI, if used in the right way, as being a very positive response to that. Again, I'm not naive, and I've seen Terminator, etc. So I'm sure there's things to be worried about with AI. But I just in my own work, I know that I once had a time back in the day when I had one of those proper jobs I spoke about before, where I had a PA, an executive assistant, and a secretary all at the same time, and they would compete to help me in terms of what I was doing, in various different ways. As a kind of sole trader, effectively consultant now, I've got to do all that stuff myself, and I've found using the tools that are available now to assist with note taking, minute taking, recording, sharing, helping me get through documents, etc. A very, I'm only just scratching the very top of the surface of AI, and it's been helpful to me. Things that may have taken me 2 hours, I can do in 10, 15 minutes now, which is remarkable. And if you apply that cumulatively across everybody like me and everyone else that does what they do, I mean, it's scary, but also very exciting as well.
Yeah. Do you think we're brave enough? Do you think the industry's brave enough to adopt it?
I think we're going to have to be, because I think if we not, we'll be left behind, because others will. And it's one of those things. If you wait, is it the phrase, if you snooze, you lose?
Yeah.
I think with this, it's about, as part of the partnerships I'm involved in, is encouraging people to think creatively, to learn from those that are doing it, but not ignore it. Because I think if you ignore it, that's where, you're either going to end up with problems or being left behind. And I think increasingly, this is where I think that the newer entrants to our professions, those that are, somewhat younger than me, probably closer to the age of my children and their friends. I've got a son who's in his 30s now, so we're not talking, school age, but they're much more comfortable with these tools than some of the older professionals, and using, their skills, their interest, enthusiasm to bring these things to help us. I think, yeah, I think it's an inevitability now.
Yeah,
It's like if you ignore it, you'll get left behind.
absolutely. So you mentioned the Terminator. Do you see
Yeah.
any concerns you see in that space? Like people doing less
The
with
thing is, the honest answer is, Paul, I just don't know enough about it. And I think, there's probably people, that are much better placed to worry about those things. I'm very much a kind of glass half full kind of person. And so I'll be trying to do what I can do to use it to help me. I'll let others worry about, whether the robots are going to take over.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm in the same space. um, what opportunities are you seeing currently in housing
Well,
in general?
I, as I say, worked as a local bureaucrat for a very long time. So I don't make political value judgments in my work. Planning reform that creates an environment where, if we, join arms and coalesce to really get on and make a difference, and we can start making a dent in that permacrisis. I'm very excited about the next decade and the ability to turn the tide, if you like, on our lack of delivery. I mean, I work mainly in Kent, Essex, and East Sussex, with a particular focus on Kent in my role as chair of Kent Housing Group. Over the last year or so, we developed and launched a new housing strategy. As part of that, we required an evidence base. So we looked back at how we were doing. And over the last 5 years, we'd delivered 24% fewer homes in total than our local plans required us to. Plans that were not imposed from the centre, but are locally constituted plans. But more worrying, we'd only delivered a third of the social and affordable homes that we needed against our own local requirements. And so bringing resource, bringing fresh focus, and new ways to get on and get those things delivered is something that is important. We have some significant hurdles to get over. We currently have what I kind of describe as market failure in the Section 106 affordable housing route to deliver homes. That's traditionally delivered about half of all our affordable homes, and so there's work to be done with that. But those that are grant supported from the government via Homes England, there is a solid plan developing to do something about that. And we should see both housing associations and councils delivering at a rate that we've not seen probably since mid to late 1960s, if we get this right. I think peak housing delivery was something like 1968. And when we had that, a very significant chunk of the homes were being delivered not only by the market, but the public sector as well.
Mm. Do you see any challenge with, actual people being able to put the bricks together? I used that the wrong term, lay
Yeah.
the bricks rather. Because everyone I speak to on these podcasts said there's a challenge with recruiting people, finding people, the manpower to actually do these things. And we talk about building things off site and then constructing them together. That seems to be posing a challenge in terms of its cost. Is it more cost effective? It doesn't seem to be at the minute. Certainly in the US, it certainly isn't. But I don't know so much in the UK. But do you think we'll address that skills shortage to actually facilitate?
We
The
need to.
spend.
There is a skills issue. A number of factors have played into that. Some demographic, some political. There is either a paucity or quite a bit of grey hair under a lot of hard hats on building sites.
Mm.
The it's at the moment, I think one of the things, because there is a relatively modest amount of activity going on to where we need to get to, that masks to some extent that skills problem. Uh, I'm in my work, I'm working with a number of different organisations that are looking to focus on that. In Kent, the North Kent College has been successful in getting some resources recently as part of a technical, bringing forward plans for technical excellence offers. And I think that we need to be encouraging not only, children in our schools to see construction as an exciting and a viable choice for them, but potentially looking at reskilling as well. And I mean, you touched on modern methods of construction, off-site construction. We've been singularly unsuccessful, really, in making that work in the UK. And part of it, I think, is because we've not committed enough pipeline of activity to bring a properly viable offer there. But this, assuming that with this upturn in activity that I've kind of predicted, and there is pipeline, then there will be a need for capital investment in the factories, etc., to bring those homes forward. But there will be new skills needed in those factories, but also new skills on site. It's a different set of skills, commissioning or landing and commissioning either volumetric or panelized systems than there is in building, the typical big brick block in a muddy field. I don't make any value judgments about traditional house building. We need that sector. We need those skills to be working 100%. But that still will not be enough in terms of delivery. So this is about trying to encourage and support a broader kind of economy of options that includes those new methods that we've been, as I say, as yet not very good for housing. They've been quite successful in education, in student accommodation, and various other things. So I think the technicalities of it are there. I think it's a built form that is of quality, can be very energy efficient,
Mm.
and long lasting, and is supported by, there's a assurance scheme, BOPAS, the build offsite property assurance scheme, which will give a 60-year warranty on the offsite companies that are built in that compliant way. But as of yet, we're not quite there.
Mm.
I think we just need to be being creative and finding ways, and frankly, there will be the need for, I think, government support as well in terms of bringing those things forward.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody in California, and we were talking about similar sort of thing with the modular builds, and it said some people in I can't remember which state it was now, saying they've been quite successful with importing them in from China, which seems absolutely insane to me. You're bringing in a house essentially from China and building it, and then the biggest cost was actually moving it up the road and moving
Yeah.
telegraph poles.
Or you're shipping, but the problem with volumetric over that is that the main thing you're shipping is air.
Mm.
Because if you've made a pot, if you've made a pod that's going to be landed on top of another pod, the biggest amount of space in there is going to be vacant. So it's not, but a kit of parts or a panelized system, you can see some merit in that. But yeah, we've still got a little way to go to make this work. I think in the States and in China, they've also been looking at 3D printing, and that sounds like a kind of slightly stupid thing, but I've seen some very interesting buildings and approaches to that. And of course, again, we may find that that's part of our future as well.
Yeah, it's certainly advanced since the early days of, it's printing a 3D model of something. Yeah, it's totally transformed. So I was going to ask you some questions about, how your business fits in the marketplace, but you're not really, you don't
I'm
worry
not
about
really. I'm
this.
sort of a business, but I'm more really. I mean, the consultancy I established was really as a vehicle for my meddling more than anything. So it gave me a platform to be able to get involved with the things that I'm most interested in, and people have been very kind in supporting that. It's a relatively kind of unique role. and I think is predicated on the fact that I've been around quite a long time. I've generally tried to treat people reasonably along the way, and that though there's a kind of muscle memory from people in various roles that I was someone that they either required or wanted to listen to and take notice of. And so, people will approach me and say, I've been trying to speak to or trying to get a hearing from, and no, they won't listen. And I'll drop a text or send an email, and people will kindly, respond positively. So a broad range of what I'm doing is either bringing ideas together or bringing people together, or removing blockages from getting stuff done, particularly around social affordable housing. Sometimes I say, there's the kind of you say potato, I say potato. That people don't. Well, why don't they like what I want to do? Why? Because people don't quite get it. And also, I think I'm generally get a kind of innocent to proven guilty approach to what I do. Whereas, in the system, unfortunately, there's quite a lot of guilty into proven innocent that goes on. So it's as I say, reasonably unique role, but one that keeps me busy and generally happy, if you like, in terms of hopefully making some positive difference in the areas that I choose to work in.
Good. So, do you have any objectives then? Well, I normally associate this with a business objective over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, but I'm sure you've got a personal one
Yeah,
within.
well, I'm, professionally, this is the Kent and Medway housing strategy. Delivering that over the next 4 or 5 years is something that I've committed to, and that's not something that is part of my consultancy work as such. Elements around it, so that's a body of work, and equally, I've got similar commitments both in Essex and East Sussex around that. So, helping to shape things that make a difference at a kind of strategic level, using the good offices that we've got of various channels to engage with both government and government agencies about what good looks like, what will work, is important. And I suppose on the side of that, there are a number of as I say, of my clients, the people that are paying for me to do what I do, helping them get their projects across the line. And those are a mix of affordable housing projects, but also I work with some smaller developers and organisations that are getting more modest things forward, but helping them get those projects across the line and seeing the difference. Because that if we want to deliver 300,000 homes a year or plus in the UK, we need those being delivered at all scales. So strategic sites, garden communities, to sites of several hundred or several thousand, but also the ones, the twos, the fives, the tens. They all feed in to getting to the numbers that we need. And so a number of things where I have a more direct influence over, and seeing those projects delivered is something that's important to me as well.
Nice. So in order to achieve all those numbers, then what's the biggest operational challenge do you see, given your experience?
The thing is, it's not one single issue. I think politicians often like to have one big issue, or the silver bullet. But what I've learned over the years is that actually what it is, it's lots of small things often rather than the single big thing. But certainly in terms of the housing delivery, then a more compliant and better resource planning system, an understanding of the importance of investing in infrastructure to support new development, and trying to get that infrastructure in front of or in parallel to the new development coming forwards and not after the event, because that's what creates the NIMBYs, the not in my backyards, is when people have been promised things and they're not being delivered, and you prove them right in terms of their skepticism about the value of new development. But also turning the tide on that sort of what seems to be quite pervasive and loud NIMBY voice across development, and trying to turn the volume up on the yes in my backyard, if you like, the YIMBYs. And I think that's particularly coming from younger people who are not content to sit back and look at people my age that have been fortunate, and I think I got on the property ladder in my mid-20s and have benefited over the last 30-40 years within that. And I don't think it's good enough for us to be kind of pulling the ladder up on those generations behind us. And I think that, as I say, it excites me, the fact that people will be stepping up, making the case for good plan-led growth and being part of, I think, what we, as I say, potentially could be a very exciting period of actually getting on and getting stuff done, than finding reasons not to do it.
Good. And in your role as supporting Kent and the others, what would it mean to you to achieve your objectives?
Well, there's one single metric that I think is enormously compelling in terms of our need to build more homes, and that's the number of children we have in temporary accommodation. So these are households that local authorities have a duty to house, or either through the home, generally through the homelessness route. So these families find themselves waiting for their permanent home to come forward, and currently, at any period, the number of children in Kent and Medway in temporary accommodation runs between sort of 3,500. So these are children that on a Monday don't necessarily know where they're going to be living the following Friday, that may be in a hotel room or in a hostel or a temporary property that may or may not be convenient for their school, that may or may not be close to their family networks, that may or may not be a place as a kitchen where they can cook. They may have to have takeaways because there's no other way to feed themselves. That's one metric that I will be watching as part of, are we having a positive impact? And the way you solve that is not to build more temporary accommodation, it's to build more homes. And it's to build more homes of all kinds, because within as I said before, within this market that we've got, half of our new social and affordable homes come through the planning gain associated with Section 106. And so we need the market to be building the homes, as well as the local authorities and the housing associations, if we're actually going to make an enduring impact on that, if you like, on that metric.
Yeah. Nice. Brian, we've come to the end of the podcast. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. You've spoken so candidly and openly about your passion and your meddling, as you call it, in the housing sector. I've personally enjoyed our close to 30-minute conversation. So thank you very much for joining me today.
You're very welcome, Paul. Thank you for having me.